There is a very specific heavy kind of silence that falls over a room when a predator realizes they have walked into a cage, a silence that isn't merely the absence of noise but a physical weight, pressing against your eardrums like deep water and making the air feel suddenly too thin to breathe. And that is exactly the suffocating atmosphere that filled my mahogany-paneled study on a rainy Tuesday morning. My niece, Veronica, was smiling when she walked in, the heels of her shoes clicking a sharp, confident rhythm on the hardwood floors I had just refinished, wearing a bespoke Chanel blazer that cost more than most people's annual mortgage payments and carrying a crocodile skin briefcase that she held like a weapon, wearing that expression she always reserved specifically for me, a toxic, curdled cocktail of pity and impatience disguised as familial affection, because she thought she was walking in to sign the deed to my house, thinking she was witnessing the final surrender of a confused old man and was about to inherit the world she felt she was owed, never once suspecting that I had spent the last 90 days building a cage specifically for her, a cage made not of steel bars or electric fences, but of paper, ink, fine print, and the blinding, intoxicating arrogance of her own greed. There is a very specific heavy kind of silence that falls over a room when a predator realizes they have walked into a cage, a silence that isn't merely the absence of noise but a physical weight, pressing against your eardrums like deep water and making the air feel suddenly too thin to breathe. And that is exactly the suffocating atmosphere that filled my mahogany-paneled study on a rainy Tuesday morning. My name is Arthur Finch, I am 68 years old, and while I may look like a retiree tending to his rose garden, for 40 years I worked in the merciless engine room of corporate finance, managing hostile takeovers, dismantling failing conglomerates, and restructuring sovereign debt for nations that had spent more than they earned, learning very early on that money does not have a conscience, it only has a direction. And if you do not control that direction with an iron grip, it will run you over. Without a second thought, I retired to this sprawling Georgian estate to find peace, to leave the sharks behind, but instead, I found a war in my own living room. 6 months ago, the heart of this house stopped beating when my wife Eleanor passed away. She was the kindness and the light in my life, and I was merely the structure that protected it, but when she died, she left behind a legacy of immense charity, a beautiful estate filled with memories, and a significant fortune, alongside a single heir designated to take it all once I was gone, her sister's daughter Veronica, or Ronnie, as she insisted on being called with that sharp modern inflection. Ronnie didn't visit when Eleanor was sick, not once in those final, agonizing 4 months of hospice care when the house smelled of medicine and sorrow. She was always too busy with her socialite life in Manhattan, attending galas and gallery openings, sending expensive, impersonal flower arrangements that withered in 2 days instead of sending herself, yet 3 days after the funeral. While the dirt was still fresh on Eleanor's grave, she was at my doorstep wearing gray, the color of a shark in shallow water, and saying, "Arthur, darling, this house is just too much for you," while looking past me at the Victorian vase on the mantelpiece and calculating the auction price of the Persian rug I was standing on, making me realize with a jolt of cold clarity that she didn't want to help me, she wanted to liquidate me. 6 months ago, the heart of this house stopped beating when my wife Eleanor passed away. She was the kindness and the light in my life, and I was merely the structure that protected it, but when she died, she left behind a legacy of immense charity, a beautiful estate filled with memories, and a significant fortune, alongside a single heir designated to take it all once I was gone, her sister's daughter Veronica, or Ronnie, as she insisted on being called with that sharp modern inflection. To understand the war, you have to understand the battlefield. Eleanor's will was generous but had a standard protective clause stating I retain full control of all assets until my death unless I was deemed mentally incapacitated or unable to care for myself by a certified medical professional, a trigger clause Ronnie found within the first week of snooping through my desk and decided to weaponize against me. It started small, as gaslighting is never an explosion but a slow, maddening leak designed to make you question your own reality. I am a meticulous man where everything has a place, yet my keys, which always go in the porcelain bowl by the door, would disappear and reappear hours later in the refrigerator next to the milk jug, with Ronnie walking in at that exact moment to say, "Oh Arthur, did you put them there again?" That's the second time this week, her voice dripping with performative worry to plant a seed of doubt in my mind. Then it was the thermostat incident. I keep this house at exactly 72 degrees to preserve the antique wood and comfort my joints, but I woke up one Tuesday sweating in a house that had been cranked up to 85 degrees, the heat blasting from the vents like a furnace, and when I confronted Ronnie, she looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, claiming I had been shivering the night before and had demanded she turn it up, asking me, "Don't you remember, Arthur? You were freezing," before pulling out her black leather notebook to write it all down, building a case file documenting my decline day by day. The humiliation peaked 2 weeks later when she invited me to dinner at Le Bernardin, a place I used to close deals in, bringing along a guest named Dr. Evans, introduced as a friend of the family, but who I quickly deduced was a geriatric neurologist she had retained. Throughout the meal, while I tried to enjoy my wine, he grilled me with questions that weren't conversation but examination, asking, "Who is the vice president? And can you count backward from 100 by sevens? And do you recall what you ordered 5 minutes ago?" And even though I answered every question with surgical precision, detailing the geopolitical implications of the current administration and reciting the mathematical sequence effortlessly, Ronnie would sigh heavily every time I paused to chew or take a sip of water, looking at the doctor as if to say, "See?" Then it was the thermostat incident. I keep this house at exactly 72 degrees to preserve the antique wood and comfort my joints, but I woke up one Tuesday sweating in a house that had been cranked up to 85 degrees, the heat blasting from the vents like a furnace, and when I confronted Ronnie, she looked at me with wide, terrified eyes, claiming I had been shivering the night before and had demanded she turn it up, asking me, "Don't you remember, Arthur? You were freezing," before pulling out her black leather notebook to write it all down, building a case file documenting my decline day by day. He's struggling, he's masking it, effectively painting a picture of a man losing his grip. She wasn't trying to send me to a nice retirement community for my own good. She was trying to declare me incompetent so she could get power of attorney, sell the house, liquidate Eleanor's portfolio, and funnel the cash into her failing lifestyle to cover her own debts. The final straw came when she laid the glossy brochure for Sunset Manor, assisted living and memory care on the kitchen counter one morning, tapping it with a manicured fingernail and telling me, "It's $12,000 a month, but don't worry, Uncle Arthur, once I take over the accounts, I'll make sure it's paid. I have a duty to protect the estate from your mismanagement." I went to my study that night, the weight of her betrayal pressing on my chest, and poured a glass of 25-year-old single malt scotch that Eleanor had bought me for our anniversary, sitting in the dark and letting the cold, calculating rage of a financier wash over me, realizing I couldn't win a memory game in court where a judge might believe the concerned young niece over the confused, grieving old man. So I decided to move the war from a subjective realm of medicine to the absolute realm of finance and set a gilded trap. She wasn't trying to send me to a nice retirement community for my own good. She was trying to declare me incompetent so she could get power of attorney, sell the house, liquidate Eleanor's portfolio, and funnel the cash into her failing lifestyle to cover her own debts. The next morning, I called Ronnie with a weak, tremulous voice I practiced in the mirror, admitting defeat and suggesting that instead of a simple power of attorney which could be challenged, we should set up an irrevocable trust to secure the estate permanently for her, transferring the house, the bonds, and the $4.2 million investment portfolio into a lockbox where I couldn't waste the principal. A proposal that made her greed spike so high she rushed over within the hour with her high-priced lawyer, Mr. Sterling. Sterling was a sharp-suited shark who made the classic mistake of greedy men by looking only at the gross assets column and ignoring the liabilities definitions. He reviewed the bylaws where Clause 4, Section B stated the trust was responsible for all living, medical, dietary, and administrative expenses of the grantor me, to maintain my current standard of living until death, and Clause 5. Section A stated the beneficiary, Ronnie, was entitled only to the net asset value upon dissolution. It looked standard. It looked like I was putting myself on a strict allowance to protect her inheritance. So Ronnie signed the document handing over legal control of everything to the trust, smiling the pitying smile and thinking she had won the lottery, completely unaware that I had also signed a separate, private contract with the trust entity appointing myself as the senior estate management consultant. With a salary of $150,000 per month, a fee fully justified by my 40 years of expert experience in managing complex assets. For the next 90 days, I didn't just live, I flourished, inhabiting a golden bubble of my own design while Ronnie went back to New York, confident her money was safe in the iron vault she had forced me to build, completely unaware that I was holding the back door of that vault wide open, inviting the wind to blow through it and scatter the fortune she felt entitled to. I didn't spend recklessly or illegally, because throwing money away on gambling or frivolous gifts would be gauche and legally challengeable. Instead, I spent with the cold precision of a surgeon according to the contract, using the very clauses she had signed to drain the swamp she hoped to inherit, turning her own protective measures into the instruments of her financial demise. First, I dealt with the spy. I fired the nurse Ronnie had hired, handing her a generous severance check drawn from the trust, and telling her that her services were no longer required because the trust had decided to pursue a more holistic approach to my health. I replaced her immediately with Chef Henri, a Michelin-starred sous chef from Lyon who had grown tired of the screaming and the pressure of professional kitchens and wanted a quiet life cooking for a man who appreciated the finer things. I gave him a quiet life, and a budget that would make a restaurateur weep with envy, instructing him that my dietary maintenance, a critical component of my health under the trust's bylaws, required the finest ingredients on earth. The kitchen, which once smelled of disinfectant and old age, began to smell of saffron, white truffles imported from Alba, and reduction sauces that took 3 days to prepare. Every Tuesday lunch featured a side of A5 Wagyu beef flown in from Japan, billed as necessary protein for a man of my age, and every evening ended with a vintage Bordeaux to aid digestion, all of it stamped, filed, and paid for by the trust under the unimpeachable heading of nutritional support, transforming my dining room into the most exclusive restaurant in the state where the only patron was the man Ronnie thought was losing his mind. Then I turned my attention to the library, the room where Eleanor and I had spent so many quiet evenings. The shelves were oak, sturdy but pedestrian, and Eleanor had always remarked that she loved the rich, dark warmth of mahogany. I decided to honor her memory by upgrading the asset. I hired a team of master artisans, not mere contractors, to rip out the old shelves and replace them with hand-carved, sustainable Brazilian mahogany, a project that took 6 weeks of dust and noise but resulted in a masterpiece of woodworking that smelled of oil and money. I filled those new shelves with rare first editions and historical manuscripts, justifying the expense as intellectual stimulation, crucial for preventing the very cognitive decline Ronnie was so worried about. The renovation cost $250,000, every cent of it billed to property preservation and improvement, theoretically increasing the asset value of the home Ronnie thought she would soon be selling, unaware that she was paying for the very upgrade she would never benefit from. I also decided the estate's security was woefully lacking, especially with greedy relatives lurking about and trying to break into my life to steal my peace, so I hired a top-tier security firm, the kind that protects diplomats and diamond merchants, to install a military-grade system. We installed thermal imaging cameras in the garden, biometric fingerprint scanners on the study doors, and a reinforced panic room in the basement that could withstand a siege, hiring a private security detail to patrol the perimeter at night. The irony was delicious. Ronnie had claimed she wanted to protect the estate, so I was simply taking her instructions literally, protecting the estate from the biggest threat it faced, her. The bills for asset protection services were astronomical, draining thousands of dollars a week, but security, as they say, is priceless. And of course, there was my salary, the linchpin of my daily satisfaction. Every month on the 1st, at 9 a.m. sharp, the trust automatically initiated a wire transfer of $150,000 into my personal private offshore account in the Cayman Islands. This was my consulting fee, taxable but rightfully mine, a severance package for tolerating her toxicity, and a fee fully justified by the 40 years of expert experience I brought to managing such a complex portfolio. But the masterstroke, the piece de resistance that would ultimately seal her fate, was the long-term care policy. Ronnie wanted me in a home? She was so concerned about my future care? Fine. I decided to oblige her in the most spectacular way possible. I researched not the sad beige facilities in the suburbs, but the world of elite retirement, I found the Alpine Sanctuary near Gstaad in Switzerland, the most exclusive, luxurious retirement villa in the world, a place where European royalty and retired industrial titans go to fade away among the mountains and the chocolate. It required a massive, non-refundable down payment to reserve a platinum suite for the next 20 years, ensuring my place regardless of when I decided to move in. I called the Swiss administrators, had the trust draft the check, and wired $1.2 million cash in a single afternoon. It was gone instantly, a perfectly legal medical expense under the bylaws to ensure my future care was absolute, a sunk cost that could never be recovered. I sat in my renovated library, sipping a glass of cognac that cost more than Ronnie's car, and watched the account balances drop on my laptop screen. It was the most satisfying financial trend I had ever witnessed. $4 million. $3 million, $1.5 million. Each dip in the graph was a victory, each invoice was a battle won, and each zero disappearing from the balance was a shackle falling off my wrists. I wasn't stealing, I wasn't embezzling, I was managing. I was following the rules she signed. I was obeying the cage she built. I was bleeding the beast dry, one signature, one truffle, one mahogany shelf at a time. Until last week, when Ronnie finally got impatient. She had likely overextended herself in New York, perhaps buying a condo she couldn't afford on the promise of her future inheritance, or maybe she just tired of waiting for me to die. She triggered the clause. She filed a legal petition in state court claiming I was incompetent, citing the missing keys and the nurse's notes from months ago as proof of my decline, and demanding the immediate dissolution of the trust so she could take direct control of the cash now. She didn't want to wait for nature to take its course. She wanted the payout. We met in my study on a rainy Tuesday, the circle closing exactly where it began, with Mr. Sterling present, looking bored and expensive, and Ronnie holding a glass of my champagne, looking triumphant, her eyes gleaming with the anticipation of a windfall she had already mentally spent. "It's over, Arthur," she said, not even pretending to be kind anymore, dropping the mask completely. "We have the court order. We're dissolving the trust. Hand over the accounts. I'm listing the house for sale next week." "Very well," I said, remaining seated, calm, my voice steady. "The trust is indeed dissolved upon your petition. As per the agreement, the beneficiary, you Veronica, receives the net asset value." "Stop talking like a banker, Arthur," she snapped, extending her hand. "Just give me the check." I slid the final accounting portfolio across the mahogany desk. It was heavy, bound in leather, and smelled of finality. Ronnie grabbed it, opening it to the first page, and I watched her eyes widen as she saw the top line: gross assets, real estate plus portfolio $4.2 million. She grinned, a predatory, hungry grin, thinking she had won, thinking she was rich. Then her eyes went down to the deduction columns, and the grin faltered, then froze, then vanished completely. She read out loud, her voice trembling, less, outstanding management fees, A. Finch 3 months, $450,000. Less, prepaid Swiss medical reservation, non-refundable, $1.2 million. Less, library renovation and AMP, structural repair, $250,000. Less, legal retainers and AMP, security audit fees, $300,000. She flipped the pages frantically, her breath hitching, her hands shaking as she tried to make the math work in her favor. What is this?" she whispered. "Keep reading," I said softly, leaning back in my leather chair. She reached the bottom line, where the final, crushing blow awaited. Less, mortgage lien, secured against the house to pay management fees. She looked at the final number, the number printed in bold, red ink that signified the end of her world. Net asset value, minus $14,000.00. Deficit. The silence in the room was absolute, heavy, and crushing, the sound of a cage slamming shut forever. "Negative," she screamed, her voice cracking, hysteria bubbling up. "How can it be negative? You had $4 million. You ruined it. I had $4 million, I corrected her, my voice dropping to the cold, hard tone of a man who used to fire people for a living. The trust had $4 million. And you insisted the trust handle all my expenses. You wanted to ensure my care. You wanted to protect the estate. Well, it did. I prepaid for my lifelong maintenance, should I ever need it. I paid the manager for his expert services. And when the liquid cash ran out last month to pay my salary, the trust borrowed against the house to fulfill its contractual obligations to me. But the house, she stammered, looking around the room she thought she owned. I'm selling the house. You can't, I said simply. The bank owns the house now. The trust owns the debt. And since you just signed the dissolution papers accepting the trust's net position, you don't inherit the fortune, Ronnie. You inherit the bill. You owe the trust $14,000 to close the books. Mr. Sterling turned pale, the blood draining from his face as he checked the papers, tracing the clauses with a trembling finger, desperately looking for a loophole, a loose thread, anything to save his client. He found nothing. He stopped when he realized he hadn't been negotiating with a senile old man but with a financial master, a man who viewed money as a weapon. He knew the law, and he knew I had tied it up so tight, so perfectly legal, that unraveling it would cost more in legal fees than the estate was worth. He closed his briefcase with a heavy click, looked at Ronnie with a mixture of pity and disgust, and walked out without a word, leaving his client to face the ruin alone. Ronnie didn't scream again. The screaming was for when she thought she had power. Now she just made a sound, a choked, gasping noise, like an animal realizing its leg is caught in a steel trap. She looked at me, searching for the uncle she thought was weak, searching for the confused old man she had mocked. She found only the financier she had severely underestimated. There was no pity in my eyes, only the balance sheet. She turned and ran, moving so fast she stumbled in the foyer in her expensive heels, leaving her crocodile briefcase behind, a predator leaving its skin, before peeling out of the driveway, tires screeching against the asphalt, fleeing back to a life she could no longer afford. My lawyers tell me she is trying to sue for fraud, claiming undue influence and elder abuse, but she is trapped in a logic loop of her own making, a paradox of avarice. She can't claim I was incompetent without validating the trust documents she signed to protect me which authorized my spending, and she can't claim I tricked her without admitting to the court that I was mentally competent enough to outsmart her. So I sit here in my quiet study, the vulture gone, the air breathable again, with my private pension, my offshore millions safely tucked away, and a platinum reservation in Switzerland. I look at Eleanor's picture on my desk, her smile frozen in time, and I know that while I wanted peace to grieve my wife, in this world you cannot just inherit peace. You have to buy it, you have to fight for it, and sometimes you have to bury someone, financially, legally, completely, to keep it. I made sure Veronica paid the full price for her greed. She wanted my legacy. She got it. She got the lesson that will last her the rest of her life, a lesson worth more than any trust fund. Never audit a man who knows how to cook the books. My name is Arthur Finch, and this beautiful, expensive, lonely silence is my heirloom. Greed leaves scars on everyone. To witness the next repayment, subscribe.